Good morning and welcome to a video where you get flaming hot takes and I get threatening messages in the comments section. That's right, Battlefield 5's a medic. The vessel for the game's biggest sweethearts and its sweatiest tryhards. And what are the tools of the tryhard's trade? In my opinion, the medic's primary weapons are the most polarized in terms of respectability, ranging from despicable and unoriginal to nigh unhateable. My name is Professor Mem, and I aim to educate you on these very guns. They will be given a spot on this tier list based on how useful they are in gameplay, how the weapons themselves look, and how they're handled, and which ones I take a personal shine to. Yes, I relented and made it a full-blown tier list rather than just a 1 to 10 rating. I simply don't have a need for 10 different scores. 7 should do. With that said, keep in mind that if something appears on the lower half of the tier list, to me that doesn't necessarily mean that they are less than a 5. The tiers roughly go like this. 10s and 9s are S tier, 1s, 2s, and 3s are F tier, and the rest just go 8 A tier, 7 B tier, 6 C tier, and so on. Don't worry, I'll still let you know if I think a gun is like a 1 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. Now, unlike the assault weapons, most of the medic's guns have the exact same damage model, with 13 of medic's 16 weapons being submachine guns, and 10 of said submachine guns killing in 4 body shots out to 10 meters, then 5 body shots out to 20 meters, and you get the point. Anything beyond that, and it's up in the air as far as I'm concerned. It sure is a shame that Medic doesn't have any weapons other than SMGs that would be more oriented towards long-range engagements. Oh well. I guess this Sten is about as close as we'll get. Sten. When you boot up Battlefield and are dropped into the chaos for the very first time as a field medic, they send you on your way with this pipe and scrap metal welded together. Hey, whose idea was this? I know medics aren't supposed to really be the main fighting force, but could I maybe get an actual gun instead of something that looks like a half-baked decoy of a gun? You know, just in case I actually need to defend myself? Well, my dear medic, why don't you just squeeze that trigger and oh my god, it works. I take back everything I said about medics not being combatants. SMGs are the ultimate implement of close quarters battle. Automatic weapons with hipfire of just the right tightness, easy to control, and equipped to a class with unlimited medkits. It's easy to see why there are so many medics in this game who never do their job. They just want to use SMGs, baby. This plumber's abortion is very easy to control by virtue of its low-end fire rate, and, despite its construction, somehow quite accurate. It's often traded out by most for something with a higher RPM, but those people obviously weren't planning on fighting outdoors. If they ever decide to touch grass and need a gun that's usefulness extends to medium ranges, I'll recommend them the British Sten. B tier. Suomi KP-31. The submachine gun with the second highest rate of fire and considerable recoil, this is one of those favorites of the indoors crowd. Obviously having a rate of fire of 770 rounds per minute versus 540 with the same damage per bullet gives you a faster time to kill, but that's only theoretically. Let's see you stay on target at 20 meters when your gun's going whew whew whew. Like look at that stat drop, that's a lot of damage. But herein lies the fun of your choice in submachine gun. Yes, they all may be the same class of weapon and be functionally similar, but it's all about picking which one's for you. I call your attention again to this graph from the last video. When your fire rate goes up and your control goes down, you'll be more prepared for faster paced, closer range engagements, but if you're one of those control freaks like myself, you'll be equipped for longer range engagements. But with the Suomi, you won't be having a good time unless you get yourself a 50-round coffin mag. I know that light bolt might seem tempting, but 20 rounds is too few to be firing at 980 rounds per minute. Oops, looks like the 50-round magazine couldn't be found for this weapon skin. I guess I'll just kill them with kindness. The KP-31 is fun for fighting in tight spaces, and I'm glad to see some Finnish representation. Now one just has to wonder where the rest of the Eastern Front is. C tier. MP40. Ah yes, the Germany gun. Its aesthetic is captured perfectly in Battlefield 5. There's something about this gun. I can't help but want to use it in hipfire only. Maybe it's something I like about its profile, maybe it's something I dislike about its sights. Whatever the case, thank God for enhanced grips and polished action. These specializations make hipfire radius narrow and keep it narrow. These are offered on many submachine guns, but for some it just feels right. Although, while being statistically similar to the Sten by default, these two differ quite drastically in how I perceive them. While I like the aesthetic of the MP40 better overall, I feel that I enjoy actually using the Sten more. I am kinda shooting myself in the boot here though, because hipfire and low RPM go together about as well as eating and laying in bed. It works, but isn't especially good. But I won't stop anyway. D tier. MP28. With middle-of-the-road rate of fire and low muzzle velocity even among SMGs, the MP28 isn't exactly asking to be put to use at longer ranges, but does in fact serve favorably well as another hipfire SMG. I found a good amount of success with this particular gun, because believe it or not, even at close range hipfire can get out of hand with higher fire rates. But the MP28 is in the perfect spot to stay on target in such frantic exchanges. The problem is, well, this gun is aesthetically a mess. Not the MP28 itself, I actually like its MP18 based appearance. But in-game, oh boy. Many have pointed out or noticed by now that the view model of the gun has no trigger, apparently being fired by shaking the gun very hard or some other such nonsense. Your left hand holds onto the part of the gun you are not supposed to hold it by, with a funky ass reverse grip whose practicality eludes me. The reload animation has this delay while your soldier struggles to put the magazine in the mag well. Like, what are you getting caught on? How did this happen? You're smarter than this.
Apparently not.
And the extended 50 round mag. Why is it so long? Like, I get why, it's a lot of cartridges, but it's just silly. Silly or not though, I'll never not take the extended magazine specialization. You're a real Sturmtrooper now. Just don't let your CO see you. D tier. EMP. That's right, Medic has access to the exclusive electromagnetic pulse gun, except instead of shutting down electronics, it shuts down bodily functions. The EMP is another gun that fires pretty slow and is generally really easy to control. It features a foregrip, which was very forward-thinking of them. The foregrip can change shape and material based on which weapon skin you have equipped, and I really love when the different skins change parts of the gun. There's nothing really special that can be said about gameplay. I mean, it fires at 568 rounds per minute, so it's just like a barely faster version of the MP40, except I kinda like it more. I like that it's thin and round and long, and I better not see any comments implying that I'm talking about dick. But yeah, at this point you're kind of starting to see that a lot of these SMGs are samey and some are reskins, and there are some that I don't really feel too strongly about. C tier. MP34. To further illustrate my point about these guns being samey, we have the MP34. Familiar design, familiar naming convention, and familiar fire rate. The lowest yet, sitting at 514 RPM. This is the fourth so far of 6 SMGs whose fire rate falls between 500 and 600. It amuses me that at the low end we have the MP34 with 514, plus 26 and you're up to the Sten and MP40 territory, then throw on a charitable 28 more rounds per minute and you're using the EMP. Meanwhile, the second highest rate of fire SMG is the Suomi at 770 RPM, then we jump all the way up to 1028 rounds per minute at first place. This is a very lopsided slope. The MP34 makes an extremely half-hearted attempt to justify its lower rate of fire by having better damage at range. That's right, that little sliver of extra damage you see here actually means something. But what exactly does it mean? It means that instead of doing a minimum of 12 damage, it does a minimum of 13. Doesn't change the fact that it will still take more than 5 shots past 20 meters just to kill. As we'll soon see, recoil could be lower for a gun of this fire rate, so sometimes it may not be as easy to hit repeated shots as you would expect. So it's basically the same thing as all the rest of these sub 600 RPM submachine guns. Despite all this, I still like using the MP34. My reasons? High velocity bullets boosts muzzle velocity to surpass the rest of the SMGs, which as you may have guessed, really makes it great to use at mid-range with its low rate of fire. The extended magazine is remedial to the low default capacity, so don't let anyone tell you that's a downside. And the MP34 is the only medic weapon that can mount a bayonet. Now, a bayonet on an SMG? That may sound a little foolish. After all, aren't SMGs superior guns in close-range combat? Well yes, but 514 rounds per minute isn't doing you any favors if someone smokes around the corner with something like a Suomi. A bayonet is a responsive instant kill, and what's more, they're just a load of fun. I didn't talk about them in the assault video because I didn't really use any of those with a bayonet. But whenever I do mount a bayonet, I always feel more powerful. I plan to make a video talking about them in more depth at a later date, but for now, just take my word for it. They're awesome. The MP34 was also apparently expensive to make IRL, and yeah, it shows. It's luxury. Or at least as luxury as you can get for having a magazine mounted on the side. A tier. M1928A1. Well, what can be said other than, rattle 'em, boys! That's right, it's a Tommy gun, and a drum mag having one no less. The 1928 is a lot like the Suomi, at least gameplay wise. Both are fast-firing SMGs that start with a pitiful 20-round magazine and give you the honestly pretty simple choice of a 50-round magazine or a higher rate of fire. Really the only difference is that the KP-31 fires 50 rounds per minute faster. For those down-to-the-wire decisions when you need to decide whether to be a run-and-gun quick shooter or a sprint-and-shoot speed demon, I usually tend to default to the Thompson submachine gun for that extra little bit of control and the style points. Also, I know that Battlefield 5 is usually pretty accurate in how it portrays the mechanics of its guns, but the drum magazine being inserted and removed from the side is something that a lot of other shooters seem to miss. What the M1928A1 lacks in Scandinavian representation, it makes up for in Mafia backing. It still won't do you much good beyond short range though. B tier. ZK383. Another SMG with a 514 fire rate. Attack of the Clones, am I right? Wrong. This SMG's got a frickin' bipod. Fair warning, it only does 12 damage at max range rather than 13 like the MP34, so I guess that evens things out. Pretty big for an SMG, it otherwise looks like our usual MP fare, but rather having its magwell angled upwards. It looks like an inconvenience to balance, especially with extended magazines, but that conceivable awkward handling only pushes it further into my philosophy that it's just a sub-caliber light machine gun. This gun just does not move. With or without the bipod, the ZK383's muzzle climbs like a paraplegic on Annapurna. With most SMGs, I'd recommend shooting for center of mass, and if your shots climb to the head, then that's good for you. But this is an option where I can confidently tell you to go for headshots. Its accuracy stat is the highest for any SMG, and its sights are very legible and unobtrusive with a thin front post. The high velocity bullets bring muzzle velocity up to SMG peak along with the MP34, and the extended magazine holds an above average in class 40 rounds. Okay, I know I said this gun barely moves even without a bipod, but then can you imagine what it's like with a bipod? In an instant, the ZK383 can switch from short range to mid-range weapon. This combination is really damn close to peak performance. In other words, don't even fucking think about getting the light bolt. You caveman. All told, this is actually the most range you'll be able to squeeze out of Medic. A tier. Commando Carbine. Wake the fuck up, Medic. I tricked ya. Here it is, your real long-range options. It's hard to believe that Battlefield 5 went half a year without bolt-action carbines as a weapon class for Medic. I can hardly play Medic for half an hour without feeling the tempting pull of my mouse towards those sweet, manually cycled shotguns. And in one update, we were blessed with not one, but two of them. To lay out what a bolt-action carbine is and what differentiates one from a regular old bolt-action rifle as used by the Recon class, they have a higher rate of fire, lower muzzle velocities, typically have higher magazine capacities, less recoil, and most importantly, you don't need to unscope between shots. They also can have specializations for tighter hipfire and can't mount 6x scopes, but those features may or may not be consequential based on your choices and playstyle. The big downside for all these small to moderately sized upsides is a reworked damage profile. All bolt-action carbines do about the same damage up close and can kill in one headshot or two body shots out to a certain range, whereafter it will take more shots. The higher the damage value appears, the longer this range is. The Commando Carbine is perhaps the most extreme example of the bolt-action carbine's philosophy. A quick aside to mention the looks. Based on the Lee Enfield, but sporting some notable changes, one may notice that it shoots from 1911 mags. The empty reload animation shows off the redesigned action. The barrel is shorter, though incredibly more rotund, a wooden forend it tries desperately to wrap itself around. It looks like a Star Wars gun, which isn't surprising if you know where most of those blasters come from. Its report is soft but satisfying, and working the action is impossibly fast yet somehow animated in a believable way. And overall, it gives off the impression that it's lighter than it looks. Now, to tell you what makes it the poster child for the difference between bolt-action rifle and bolt-action carbine. The Commando Carbine can fire as fast as 109 rounds per minute, but the lowest damage it can deal is 30. At short range, this incites feelings of, it's incredible that I can kill in only one shot with a gun that fires at over 100 RPM. And at long ranges becomes, why the hell does it take 4 shots to kill someone with a bolt-action weapon? Hold on, did I mention that the Commando has a suppressor? Welrod's big brother here, firing much faster and being more accurate. It invokes a similar but less careful playstyle. But who needs to time their shots when you can fire a second 45 ACP projectile in about the time it takes for your target to realize that they don't know where they got hit from? The very low recoil resets you well enough in time for your follow-up shot, and your target will likely be dazed and confused at having taken damage from an uncertain direction. Stay with me now, this next line's a doozy. I hypothesize that their incomplete assessment of the threat often delays their fight or flight response from kicking in long enough to make the killing blow easy. Well, that is, assuming that you're within range to kill in 2 body shots. According to the source I read, this range extends to 50 meters, but I think this source is either outdated or was never right in the first place.
Oh, shit.
So the Commando Carbine has a super low muzzle velocity for a gun like this. Its damage drops off quickly and dramatically. If you saw my Welrod video, I teased the fact that the Welrod has a higher minimum damage than the CC. What's up with that? 9mm from a short barrel at 100 meters? 33 damage. 45 ACP from a medium-sized barrel at 100 meters? 30 damage. That right there is the difference between 3 shots to kill and 4 shots to kill. Ballistically, just no. No to all of this. But gameplay-wise, it seems pretty justified. I don't see this as something bad about the Commando Carbine, but rather a testament to the Welrod's hidden power. After all, once you get out to those longer ranges, you can just apply that double tapping strategy to headshots. Lord knows the Commando Carbine's not making it difficult. But, message received, it's clear that this one is more short range oriented than the rest of its class. That relatively high rate of fire does work well with an upgraded hipfire spread. Okay, so it's a bolt action carbine, but is most effective at short to mid range. Well, then why not use something like a Sten or ZK383 that's arguably more consistent? Well, because it's fucking fun. S tier. Yeah, I love remodeling, I love construction, rah! M28 Con Tromboncino. Ah yes, the Gargano. This is that other bolt-action carbine I was talking about. The only gun in my whole arsenal that I've bothered getting all gold for. This, along with one of the support primary weapons, is one of the guns I immediately gravitated to when I started playing Battlefield 5. In a category of particularly underused weapons, the Tromboncino is perhaps the gun I've been killed with the least. Maybe most people don't really jive with how slow the bullet flies for being a bolt-action weapon of presumably some power, and I'll grant that. It simply doesn't make sense for this gun's muzzle velocity to be slower than a submachine gun's, unless you understand the game balancing reasons. In a massive upgrade in per-shot damage from the Commando Carbine, the Tromboncino has a minimum of 40 damage and kills in 1 headshot or 2 body shots out to 75 meters. Even if your target is beyond that effective range, you will still only need a single extra bullet to finish the job. And, as with all things, after some time in practice, you get used to the arc and velocity of the projectile. You shall understand the satisfaction of not only clicking your enemy's head just to see them instantly die with a cloud of red mist forming an unholy halo, but rather seeing your bullet bore betwixt your victim's gray matter through your very own scope. It may fire at a slower rate than the Commando Carbine too, but remember that you don't have to unscope between shots. So that being said, please use a scope, preferably 3 times magnification. Recoil is once again tame and causes more of a wobble in your line of sight than a jump. The rhythm of firing and cycling the Tromboncino is extremely natural and smooth. You work the bolt just as your aim falls back into alignment, and as the movement of your scope comes to a stop, you are ready to fire again. Continuous shots create a gentle up and down bob that almost undersells the power of the Tromboncino. If you hadn't noticed the apparatus on the side of your rifle though, you'll probably be pleased to know that it is in fact a grenade launcher. It's not just there to look steampunk. Having an impact detonated explosive ordnance tube attached directly to your gun has some fascinating effects on infantry combat. In fact, my friend Asiago Mateo has a video that demonstrates this quite well, but I was always more interested in its implementation against armored foes. Thankfully, the devs added improved grenades as a specialization for people like me. This fully functioning primary weapon also just so happens to be far and away Medic's best anti-tank tool. In a class that otherwise has scant options for dealing with any type of armored vehicle, the M28 grenade launcher lets you kill tanks. Take that in, Medic can kill tanks. Usually those steel bullies only have to look out for assault and support, maybe recon if they have an AT rifle. But you may come to find that your rampage was ended by mercy from Overwatch with a little trombone. The improved grenades do less damage against infantry, but they can still net kills against ground troops. A single weapon that can fight both snipers and tanks, from an upright position no less. Behold, ladies and gentlemen, a very biased 10 out of 10 S tier. Mab 38. I think that lately the diversity of SMGs has been on a downward spiral, and now they have lost it completely. This is a really generic looking World War II SMG that doesn't even have the courtesy of having its magazine sideways. Its 600 RPM fire rate just barely escapes being with the rest of the 500s. How entirely bold. In game though, as long as you get specializations, it's not that bad. 30 rounds per magazine is below average, but it's still better than 20, and high velocity bullets is more useful for this one than you're led to believe. It says that it increases muzzle velocity by 10% when it's actually closer to 62%. This is just another case of Battlefield stats lying to you, which actually happens pretty often. Maybe I'll make a video about that. But for now, the takeaway is that if you want to improve your knowledge about a game's weapons, you should always try reading about them online, or watching helpful videos like this one. You see, every time the high velocity bullet specialization is used, it claims to increase your muzzle velocity by 10%, when, to my knowledge, the number is usually higher. Mind you, the example of the MAB 38 is one of the greatest disparities between what you're told and how it is, but you'd probably be more keen to pick HVB if you knew that the stat increase was more than a measly 10%. Back to talking about the MAB 38. It's perfectly palatable in gameplay, but just utterly forgettable. It does have the one unique draw of having very high muzzle velocity for an SMG with that specialization, and that's about it. I can't blame anyone for this being their favorite medic weapon, because for some it probably perfectly strikes the balance between fire rate and recoil. But for someone like me who prefers to switch things up often, I still only use the MAB 38 infrequently. If I had to name anything that stands out, the two separate triggers is quirky but so unnoticeable that I just found out about it before writing this. Also, I'm probably completely alone in this since I can't explain why, but the magazine and 9mm cartridges feel small. Not that they especially look smaller than they should, but they just feel tiny. Shrug. E tier. 2 Italian weapons in a row. I probably absorbed enough wine through osmosis just by touching these things to send my blood alcohol content high as a kite. Speaking of BAC, it's time to talk about a bolt-action carbine. The Jungle Carbine, baby, let's go! This is the most like a regular bolt-action rifle in the carbine category. Fitting, as it's obviously just a chop to number 4 rifle. Its one headshot range is extended all the way out to 100 meters, although recoil is much sharper, causing a break in the legibility of your target when looking through a scope. Its muzzle velocity can be as high as 570 meters per second, and the gun is very accurate. The 3x crosshair is easier to read than the other two. In fact, I prefer this style because the point of aim is so unambiguous. The magazine capacity is also higher than the rest of the bolt-action carbines. The result is an easy-to-use quasi-sniper rifle, and it makes sense that it seems to be the most used bolt-action carbine. Again, the ability to stay scoped in while firing cannot be overstated on a weapon of this power. It helps you stay on target and be quick to fire, but the Little Lee Enfield is lacking something that the Commando Carbine and Tromboncino have. It doesn't have any special mechanic to diversify its usefulness. Maybe you can say its advantage is being able to one-shot any head within 100 meters, but suppressors and anti-tank grenades are just so much cooler. I love the Jungle Carbine, as I love every bolt-action carbine, but it's hard to pick it over the Special Agent gun and the Tank Bane. A tier. Type 100. One of the few SMGs that shakes up the damage model in a way that actually matters. Damage has been dropped down to a minimum of 20 per shot, but it fires at 720 rounds per minute, on par with the Thompson. However, per shot recoil is reduced from the Thompson. This is significant enough to be justified, as you will almost certainly land more hits. That almost is in there because I'll believe that there are people out there whose aim is that bad. But the Type 100 also has a bipod. Yeah, the bipod looks like shit, but this is a video game. You don't have to worry about how well it works in real life, because in here, it's just part of an awesome mechanic. Again, this results in a point of aim that moves slower than cold molasses. It's interesting to give an SMG with a high rate of fire, low muzzle velocity, and low damage a bipod, and though you may think it's interesting in a bad way, it's more of a, huh, that is fucking interesting. There's no other way to describe it. It doesn't feel right like the ZK383 does, but it does feel interesting. Most of the animations for the SMGs are pretty damn unremarkable, so it's nice to see the Type 100 mags being double palmed in the reload animations here. 8x22mm cartridges are easily seen in a double stack. As for the rest of the gun, it just looks like another wooden stock MP, but skinnier and with a curved magazine, so I guess it's special. B tier. M3 Grease Gun. Well, we have our second pipe gun of the day here, or perhaps it would be more sensible to compare it to a caulk gun. Yeah, right, real clever, Professor, as if that isn't the literal namesake of the gun. It looks cheap, and I love it. We've dipped below 500 RPM territory, but the trade-off is a very much worthwhile damage boost. Now capable of killing in 3 body shots at close range, I'm sure you can predict that this gun is a favorite of mine. It's not technically very accurate, but is quite controllable. Now I'm sure that you know that I love me some suppressors, and the grease gun at least looks good with one attached, but it is by far the least deserving of one. And I'm almost certain that the biggest reason I'm saying that is because it contends with recoil buffer. I mean, come on guys, you know that recoil buffer is the champ, but if I had to justify why not to use the suppressor specialization other than the pain you'll be causing yourself in missed shots, well, I think that suppressors are a better fit for slower firing and longer ranged weapons. The more you fire in close proximity, the more likely you are to be noticed by someone if they hadn't noticed you before. I'll admit that I have been completely thrown off by suppressed M3 greasies from time to time, but I find the beauty of suppressors to be in sneaking with weapons like the Welrod or the Commando Carbine. You hit them once, they're confused, they're half dead, and they're likely retreating to somewhere they think they're safe. Then you pop them another one and they're down for the count. Or even if you take them out with one headshot, at least there was no loud bang alerting other players to your presence. Or a flurry of poorly muffled 45 shots. The sound of the suppressed grease gun is just the least subtle to me of all the suppressed guns. But in the end, this whole rant wasn't even important because the suppressor isn't mandatory, and the M3 is a beautiful gun without it. S tier. Type 2A. Now this, on the other hand, is a disgusting gun no matter how you slice it. I'm gonna be real with you, I refuse to use the Type 2A on humans anymore. You knew this was coming, and if you're good at seeing patterns you can probably tell that I do not like the Type 2A. Look at you, so smart. Got me all figured out. You know what, I'm kinda spoiling the end here, but I just need to get it out of the way that this is totally the lowest ranked in this video. Now let me tell you why. An SMG should not be a replacement for a shotgun. This is really a personal feud, but I am pissed off by the satanic rate of fire in my face anytime I play a CQB map. It can kill at illogical ranges because of the sheer volume of fire and frankly generous recoil, and nothing less than a one-hit kill will spare you from the clutches of a very angry death when you come within 10 meters of anyone using it. But it's okay, man. It's fair because it does less damage per bullet than the other SMGs and has a lot of recoil. Shush. Sprint slide sweat. To be honest, I think the Type 2A's heyday is behind it. It used to be much more prevalent than it is now, but some patches saw to the tipping of the scale in favor of the Battlefield 5 players that actually have hearts. But I'm still bitter. My scars haven't faded. And there are a great many scars. It has the same damage profile as the Type 100, which makes it a minimum 5 body shot kill, and while I like the cohesion since they technically share the same cartridge, that's still too much damage. Add to that the 1000 plus RPM and the fact that it's easier to use than it should be for a gun of such bullshittery and, yeah, M2 Carbine Pro Max. To say some unironically good things about the Type 2A, I like the sound of firing it, but not being fired at with it. And I genuinely don't mean that in a it's fun to be on the giving end but not the receiving end kind of way. But rather, the firing sound from first person sounds good, but when other people fire it all you hear are the whizzing bullets. And the sound really irritates me. Like the sound of mosquitoes in your ear when you're trying to sleep. Also the design, or at least the layout of the gun, was kind of ahead of its time, and I like the empty reload. That being said, I must give it an F because I got principles. It would be a 1 out of 10 if I didn't have just enough nice things to say about it. Welgun. This final gun is yet another submachine gun with a fire rate in the 500s, matching the EMP at 568 rounds per minute. But you know, it also just casually has the best in class control stat. Better than guns that fire slower than it. Better even than the ZK383. The drawback is considerably weak accuracy, but come on, it's an SMG for crying out loud. You don't care if your sights are lying to you just a bit. I know this argument contradicts some of the other stuff I said so far, so let me clarify. That was a joke, I do care, it does matter. Anyway, now that I've covered my ass from getting that bit more grilled, let's talk about how it looks. Yep, definitely does not look accurate. That is a very short submachine gun. Gripped fairly close to the muzzle, stock is minimalist even by World War II standards, and that action is wide and open. You can envision the whole circumference of the bolt chunking back and forth, and the necessity of grabbing the bolt directly to charge the weapon seems crude but looks neat. I guess you could say that this is a pipe gun too, but the wooden furniture, especially the handguard, makes it feel comfortable. Also, I just realized that most of these SMGs don't have proper pistol grips either. Oh well, not the Welgun's problem. This gun makes its controllability believable. And I know you probably get it by now, but it has extremely manageable muzzle climb. Don't be expecting to hit anyone in longer ranges, but in all typical SMG engagement distances, you really should have no problem getting your bullets to connect and aimed fire. The Welgun is one of my favorite weapons in Battlefield 5 because of its recoil control, but I also like that it doesn't adhere to the traditional automatic weapon formula of accuracy and control being tied to one another, and both going up when fire rate decreases or vice versa. Having a trade-off of one for the other is a way to justify its inclusion when we already have an SMG that fires just as fast. Same as the bipod justifies the ZK383 when the MP34 exists. And what justifies both the Sten and MP40 being in this game? Well, the simple fact that if they weren't, there'd be an uproar. Anyway, A tier. You know folks, in the process of writing the script for this video, I realized that I am very opinionated about Medic's weapons. It makes sense though, since I am much more invested in playing Medic as opposed to Assault. I want to remind those watching that just because I rate something low on my scale, that doesn't mean it's bad for everyone, or even me all the time. I tend to still use almost all guns, just some more than others. I have a challenge for anyone who still plans to put time into Battlefield 5 and hasn't already done this. Try to get all of your guns up to at least level 4 so you can max out their specializations. It's like mandatory practice that will help you expand your skill set, and as you unlock upgrades for your guns, your quality of life will increase. You may also find new favor with an option you didn't really use before. Try not to give up when a gun seems unusable, because there's usually a spec that fixes that problem, and that's usually recoil buffer. But that's just a suggestion. You don't have to do it. After all, it's daunting, and sometimes frustrating, and most of all you should just play the game your way because that's what it's there for. I'm Professor Mem, wishing you a wonderful evening.